You were told to be kind, to listen, to validate. You were told to open up, to give her space, to be emotionally available, endlessly understanding and patient to the point of self-erasure. You were told this would earn her love, that this would build safety, that this would separate you from the selfish, the cruel, the cold. But it didn't. It made you replaceable, predictable, powerless. You thought you were doing the right thing, showing her you weren't like the others, but the more you gave, the more she drifted. The softer you became, the more she sharpened. The closer you got, the more she pulled away. And now you sit with a quiet ache, not just in your chest, but in your understanding. Because you still don't know what you did wrong. You gave her everything, and she still forgot you. You forgave her, and she stopped respecting you. You stayed, and she left. But I will tell you what no modern man dares say out loud. You weren't betrayed by her. You were betrayed by what you were taught. She didn't change. She recalculated. She studied you. She smiled while testing your edge. She praised your loyalty while punishing your softness. And when she saw that your law could be rewritten with enough tears, enough silence, enough disapproval, she made a decision. One she will never say aloud. One you felt before you ever heard the words. That your kindness was no longer respected. That your availability became noise. That your masculinity became a tool to be managed, not a force to be followed. And in that moment, when you thought you were finally safe with her, she saw you as finished. Not because she stopped loving you, but because she stopped fearing you. This video is not about revenge. It's not about hating women. It's not about becoming cold. It's about seeing clearly, for the first time. Because the truth is this: women don't want you to know how they work, not consciously, but biologically. They don't want you to learn that tests are part of the ritual, that warmth is often conditional on your strength, that loyalty is often given only to the man who can walk away, the man who can say no, the man who can leave the table and never look back. You were taught that love is unconditional, that if you just do enough, give enough, explain enough, prove enough, she will see your value. But love in her world isn't unconditional, it's strategic. And the moment she feels that she can move you emotionally, that she can rewrite your law, that she can pull you back after violating your standards without cost, she doesn't feel adored. She feels superior. And when a woman feels superior, desire begins to rot. You weren't weak. You were uninformed. You weren't too nice. You were too accessible. You weren't too emotional. You were too readable. And what you'll see in the next 80 minutes is not a theory. It is law. Power law. Political law. Masculine law. The truth that has governed kings, generals, emperors, and rulers far before she ever knew your name. And that law is this: it is safer to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both. Because fear creates gravity, and gravity holds attention. But love without fear? That is noise. That is softness. That is the man she thanks before she leaves. So if you've ever given her everything and still felt empty, still felt disposable, still watched her eyes go cold before you even finished your apology, then I want you to listen carefully. This video is not for the man who wants to be understood. It is for the man who is ready to rule. Comment, she didn't change. I gave her permission. If you now feel what your softness cost you. And stay with me, because now we begin. She doesn't test you because she's evil. She tests you because she's wired to. And the greatest illusion modern men suffer under is the belief that tests are toxic or manipulative or wrong. Number, they are biological, necessary, ancient. And if you fail to understand this, if you misread her tears, her silence, her distance as unexplainable mood swings rather than tactical data points, then you are not being loyal. You are being blind. And blind men do not get respect. They get managed. Because every time she raises her voice and watches you shrink, every time she withholds affection and watches you chase, every time she questions your tone and you begin explaining instead of enforcing, you confirm the one thing she hopes isn't true, that you can be moved, that her emotion is greater than your law, that her drama outranks your doctrine. And once she confirms this, she smiles, not with joy, with certainty, because now she knows the limits of your edge. She knows your obedience is not based in discipline but desperation. And from that point forward, your words don't matter. Your apologies don't matter. Your feelings, your backstory, your trauma, none of it matters. Because she's already seen your crown and it's plastic. You still think she wants you to be soft, open, endlessly understanding. That if you explain your intentions well enough, she'll realize you're different. But she already knows you're different. That's why she picked you. You were pliable. You were patient. You were safe. And that made you dangerous to yourself, because you never made her earn access. You handed it to her like a gift wrapped in fear. And women, even good women, do not cherish what costs them nothing. They appreciate it for a time, but they don't revere it. And reverence is the only emotional currency that sustains desire. You thought her compliments meant compliance. You thought her praise meant permanence. But the smile she gave you while testing you, that was confirmation. Confirmation that you still think this is about love, that you still believe the script, that you still haven't realized this is a game of power, and you're playing with your cards facing up. She tests because she needs to know, will you break when I bend? Will you retreat when I escalate? Will you answer questions I ask only to see if you'll defend your ground? She doesn't want to lead. She wants to lean. But she can only lean into what she cannot shake. You keep trying to be emotionally available. But what she wants, what she's searching for with every test, is something solid enough to submit to. And submission doesn't come from affection. It comes from structure. Structure that holds even when she throws chaos at it. Structure that says, you can scream, but my tone doesn't change. You can cry, but my law remains. You can pull away, but I will not chase. That's what she's waiting for. Not kindness, not reassurance, order. You were never supposed to negotiate with her emotions. You were supposed to rule in spite of them. Not coldly, not cruelly, but clearly. But instead you flinched. You flinched when she challenged your decisions. You flinched when she changed the subject. You flinched when she called you controlling for having standards. And each flinch taught her something. Taught her that your power was flexible. That your boundaries were for show. That your masculinity was performance art. And so she smiled, because the test had ended, and you failed. You will not win her with compliance. You will not win her with emotional essays. You will not win her with apologies delivered in soft tones and begging eyes. You will win her, if at all, with silence, with boundaries, with the ability to walk away, not to threaten, but to enforce. And if you cannot do that, if you flinch again, then understand this. She will not scream when she leaves. She will not cry. She will not even tell you what you did wrong. She'll just smile. Just like she did the first time you broke your law to keep her approval. And she'll vanish, because what she needed was a ruler, and you gave her a mirror, one that broke the second she stopped smiling. Power never explains itself. That is its nature. That is its brilliance. That is why it's respected. Because the moment you begin explaining your standards, justifying your boundaries, or softening your tone to be better understood, you have already lost the crown. You were raised to believe that if you explain your intent clearly enough, she will comply. That if you unpack your pain, detail your trauma, and outline your noble logic, she will see the goodness in you and submit to it. But a woman does not submit to clarity. She submits to command, to silence, to structure. And a man who needs to explain himself to earn peace in the relationship is not a ruler. He is a beggar with poetic words. You can be articulate, you can be thoughtful, but the moment your speech replaces your edge, she no longer listens to your words. She studies your posture, and if that posture bends for approval, no amount of emotional fluency will restore her respect. You still think that being misunderstood is the problem. It's not. Being explainable is. Because the masculine must remain partially unreadable to retain tension. The moment she can predict your reaction, script your behavior, feel certain that no matter how far she pushes, you will soften. You are no longer an anchor. You are a therapist with sexual tension. And no woman desires a man she can therapize. She wants a man she must interpret, not one she can direct. You think she wants understanding. She doesn't. She wants dominance, not through volume, through stillness, through the absence of negotiation, through enforcement without ceremony. Machiavelli said it best. Rulers who govern with too much softness invite rebellion. When your law can be debated, it becomes optional. When your expectations can be renegotiated through tears or arguments, they become suggestions. And a woman cannot respect suggestions from a man she expects to lead. You keep talking, trying to prove you're not like the others. But the man who truly isn't like the others doesn't need to prove it, he shows it. In silence, in command, in knowing that his standards are not up for community review. And when a woman disrespects them, he doesn't get louder, he gets distant. That is enforcement. And enforcement, when done properly, doesn't require drama. It requires discipline. A single act of removal does more than 1,000 emotional explanations. Because she must feel the law to believe in it. She must feel what violation costs. You keep trying to talk it out when the time for talking is over. She doesn't want dialogue, she wants definition. She wants to know if the man beside her still sees himself as the judge, or if he has resigned and now serves as the defense attorney for her dysfunction. You want peace, that's why you keep explaining. But peace cannot come from the erosion of your law. Peace without consequence is surrender. And when a woman senses you have surrendered your sword for her comfort, she doesn't feel loved, she feels exposed. Because now she must lead, now she must carry the frame, now she must contain the chaos. And that is a burden she resents more than anything, not because she wants control, but because she wants containment. So stop explaining, start enforcing. When she disrespects, withdraw. When she tests, do not flinch. When she begs for understanding, do not abandon your center. You are not cruel. You are not distant. You are a ruler. And a ruler governs not with words but with consequence. If you want to be understood, write poetry. If you want to be respected, build law. She will never say this aloud, not to her friends, not to you. Maybe not even to herself. But there are things she admires and things she quietly despises. And the line between them is not drawn where you think. You assume she admires your vulnerability, your accessibility, your readiness to apologize. But I tell you now, those things do not build reverence. They build relief, temporary, shallow, disposable. She may thank you for being patient, but she will forget you the moment she feels that patience comes from weakness. She may cry in your arms, but if she senses there is no edge behind your embrace, she will cry elsewhere next time. Because what women respect, what they submit to, is not your kindness. It is the cost of that kindness. If it is free, it is dismissed. If it is effortless, it is expected. And if it is given in the absence of law, it is not interpreted as love, it is interpreted as loss. She will test you. Then she will watch you. And in your response, she will make her decision. Not about your feelings, but about your frame. Because when you smile through disrespect, when you reason through betrayal, when you offer comfort after being diminished, she does not feel loved. She feels confirmed. Confirmed that you have no fortress, no throne, no standard of power that must be earned to be maintained. She smiles. She says thank you, and inside her desire dies. Slowly. Not because she is cruel, but because she has seen the truth. And the truth is this: you made yourself free. She will never tell you the exact moment she stopped respecting you. That would be too painful, too honest. But it happened. Likely in the middle of your greatest expression of love. Likely when you gave her the full truth, all your time, all your apologies, all your softness. And in that moment, when you thought you had finally secured her heart, what you had really done was reveal your spine. And she saw it bend, not to the world, to her. And that is when her eyes changed. That is when her tone cooled. That is when the silence started. She doesn't despise you for being kind. She despises that your kindness had no edge, that it cost her nothing, that it didn't have to be earned. You gave warmth like a servant, not like a king. You gave mercy like a man who feared her leaving more than he feared losing his law. And that is the moment she knew. You could not contain her chaos. You would collapse under it. And a woman, no matter how much she says she values peace, cannot relax in the arms of a man who does not enforce peace with consequence. You cannot love her into submission. You must lead her into structure. You must become a force she does not wish to provoke, not because you are cruel, but because you are cold in the face of betrayal. You must be warm, yes, but not weak, present but not pliable, generous but never for free. She doesn't despise strength. She desires it. She wants to push against your edge and feel it hold. She wants to know you have limits, not so she can break them, but so she can feel the gravity of your world, so she can trust your leadership, so she can rest not in your emotions but in your enforcement. And the moment she senses your throne can be shaken by her feelings, she stops seeing you as a ruler. She sees you as a relief station she may still visit. But she will never worship. And without worship, without fear, without weight, your presence becomes background noise. You think your empathy earns respect. But respect is not born from empathy. It is born from enforcement, from posture, from silence that punishes, from absence that teaches, from words that are rare and costs that are real. So if she despises you now, it is not because you weren't good. It is because you were good without discipline, love without consequence. And that love, my friend, is nothing. It leaves no mark. It builds no legacy. And it will never make her kneel. You were trained to obey, not by her, but by a culture designed to soften you before you ever met her. You were told that the highest form of masculinity was cooperation, that strength meant emotional vulnerability, that leadership meant flexibility, that love required transparency, tolerance, and the ability to surrender your needs to keep the peace. And you believed it. You obeyed. You lowered your voice. You explained your reasoning. You opened your heart every time she closed hers, and for a moment it worked. She smiled. She thanked you. She told you that you were the first man who truly listened. But the game was already in motion. Because the moment she felt she could bend you, she began preparing to leave you. Not because she was evil, but because she no longer had to wonder who the king was. She saw that your decisions were crowdsourced, that your identity was shaped by how she felt, that your leadership was reactive, not absolute. And so she obeyed her instincts and began discarding you piece by piece. This is the tragedy of modern man. He is not broken by betrayal, he is broken by obedience. You think if you just give more, explain more, prove more, she will see your worth. But she doesn't see your effort as value. She sees it as desperation. And desperation never commands loyalty. It invites revision. If she can rewrite your tone, she will. If she can test your patience and find that it has no edge, she will push further. If she senses that you are training yourself to become more like the man she says she wants, she will begin emotionally preparing to leave you for the man who never listened to those rules. The man who stayed silent when she raised her voice. The man who didn't explain himself when she questioned his ambition. The man who, when disrespected, vanished, without apology, without warning, without emotional collapse. She may not have liked him, but she respected him. And you, though you loved her deeply, trained her to see you as optional. Machiavelli wrote that princes must understand cruelty, not to wield it senselessly, but to know when mercy becomes weakness. You do not gain power by being universally agreeable. You gain it by being immovable. Obedience to a woman's moods, to her emotional edits, to her shifting demands. These are not acts of love. These are acts of self-erasure. And a man who erases himself to keep a woman does not keep her. He becomes her emotional secretary, her backup plan, her spiritual servant, and eventually her memory. And when you ask what went wrong, she won't have an answer. Because it didn't feel wrong. It felt inevitable. You obeyed. You folded. And she responded, not to punish you, but to survive the emptiness your obedience created. Women cannot carry the masculine role. They don't want to. But when they see no ruler in front of them, they assume command. And the moment she feels like your mother, she will begin detaching like your judge. The man who seeks her approval dies in her mind. The man who waits for her permission becomes background noise. And the man who never says no, who never enforces distance, who never makes her feel the cost of disrespect, is the man who is trained to be forgotten. Because obedience does not make you safe. It makes you replaceable. You thought you were being strong by staying calm, understanding, supportive, but strength is not measured by how much you absorb. It is measured by what you refuse to tolerate. And when you tolerated everything in her name, her outbursts, her withdrawal, her dominance, what you told her is simple. You have no king to obey. And when there is no king, the kingdom collapses. She doesn't want to lead. She wants to lean. But you left her no structure to lean into. You mistook her strength for desire. You saw her independence and assumed she wanted to carry the relationship. But strength in a woman does not mean she wants to be the one giving direction. Strength means she has learned to survive without guidance, and now she tests to see if you can finally provide it. But when she pushed, you collapsed. When she questioned, you over-explained. When she challenged, you softened your law to keep the peace. And in that moment, you did not give her relief. You gave her responsibility. The responsibility to contain the chaos you refused to structure. The burden of managing your emotional tone, your self-doubt, your attempt to win her approval instead of enforcing your leadership. You believed she would love you more for being accommodating. But love without authority turns to exhaustion. And that's what she felt when she looked at you, not safety, but weight. Machiavelli wrote that in every state, there must be one who commands and one who obeys. But in your relationship, no one commanded, and so she was forced to. Not because she wanted to, but because survival demands direction. And in the absence of a ruler, the strongest will always step forward. But a woman who is forced to lead will never remain soft. Her voice sharpens, her tone hardens, her body shifts. And you mistake this change for attitude, for disrespect. But it is not rebellion, it is adaptation. She has recalibrated to your absence, not your physical absence, but your spiritual one. She stopped seeking your guidance and began managing you because she realized that your masculinity was passive, and a passive man cannot be followed. She wanted to lean into your decision, to trust your vision, to feel the calm of your silence. But you kept inviting her into your process. You kept asking her what to do. You kept making your confidence dependent on her reactions. And with every question, with every moment of hesitation, with every missed opportunity to say no, you became more familiar, more readable, less commanding, less divine, until the man who once made her feel like a woman became a reflection of the burden she never asked to carry. You don't understand what you did wrong because you think she punished you for loving her. But she didn't. She withdrew because you loved her without law. Because you made her the decision-maker, the corrector, the emotional lead. And while she smiled and said thank you, while she told you she appreciated your softness, your openness, your vulnerability, her body was already preparing to disconnect. Because she cannot submit to someone who submits to her moods. She cannot relax in the arms of a man who waits for her to speak before standing tall. She cannot follow a leader who takes direction from her disapproval. And so, when she leads, she doesn't just lose respect for you, she loses her femininity. And when her femininity fades, her attraction dies. She doesn't want to lead. But she will if you don't. And she will resent you for making her do it. Not openly, not aggressively, but quietly, subtly. She will stop consulting you. She will stop asking for your opinion. She will begin moving around you instead of with you. And in time, she will find herself in orbit around another man, one who says less, listens less, and leads more. Not because he's better, but because he understands what you never learned. The moment you hesitate, she takes the throne. And when she sits there too long, she forgets how to come back down. She cannot fully trust a man who cannot walk away. She may say she wants loyalty, permanence, unconditional love, but beneath that language is a test you must pass without being told. That test is simple. Can he leave? Can he walk away without flinching, without begging, without becoming emotional furniture in her world? Can he uphold his law even if it means losing her? Because a man who cannot leave is not a man who loves deeply. He is a man who fears loss more than he fears disrespect. And women feel this. They sense it in the way you ask if everything is okay, in the way you fold your voice under their tone, in the way you hold them tighter when they withdraw. And instead of feeling safe, they feel something else, something dangerous to the masculine frame. They feel dominance, not yours, but theirs. And what begins as comfort transforms into command. Because if you cannot leave, you have already submitted, not to her body, not to her mind, but to her approval. And no woman can admire what she commands emotionally. A man who can leave, however, becomes an anchor, a standard, a presence that cannot be shaken by affection or threatened by silence. He listens, but he does not explain. He observes, but he does not react. He loves, but he does not beg. And because he could leave, every moment he stays has weight, gravity, intention, and that is what makes her want to stay. Not because she is afraid of abandonment, but because she is in awe of control. Control over self, control over emotion, control over access. She knows you love her, but she also knows you do not need her. And that, paradoxically, is what makes her choose you over and over again. Not because you chased her, but because you didn't need to. You were trained to think that staying no matter what would prove your love. That never leaving, no matter the disrespect, would make you irreplaceable. But that kind of permanence does not inspire devotion. It inspires decay. Because when a woman feels no risk of loss, she stops calibrating her behavior. She becomes sloppy, cold, sharp. Not because she wants to hurt you, but because you've given her no reason to remain precise. Your forgiveness has no edge. Your time has no scarcity. Your attention has no conditions. And in that environment, the feminine spirals. Without edge, she cannot feel her own shape. Without consequence, she cannot feel his worth. Machiavelli wrote that it is much safer to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. And while fear may sound harsh to the untrained, to those who understand human nature, it is balance. It is structure. It is necessary contrast. A woman must know that if she violates the law of your presence, she loses the right to be inside it. That if she breaks frame, you will not explain. You will exit. And that exit will not be emotional. It will be quiet and total. That knowledge makes her breath slow when she disrespects you. It makes her think again before crossing your standard. Not because she fears punishment, but because she knows your law is not a suggestion. You were taught to anchor through presence. But presence without principle is weightless. You do not create safety through constant access. You create safety through earned access, through rhythm, through edge, through the unspoken truth that you can leave and survive, that you do not orbit her mood, that her body, her smile, her silence cannot rewrite your standard, that she is welcome, but not entitled, and that when she stays, it is not because you begged, it is because she believes in your law, your silence, your strength. Because when a woman feels that your world remains whole with or without her, she finally feels safe enough to stay inside it. You thought you were her choice, but you were only her option. And the difference between the two is not in her words, but in her calculations. She said all the right things, that you were different, that you made her feel safe, that she could finally be herself around you. But what you didn't see was the invisible ledger forming behind her compliments. A quiet comparison chart, tracking your assertiveness, your self-command, your edge, against something she had felt before but never named. The pull of the man who doesn't need her. The man who doesn't ask where he stands. The man who doesn't flinch under pressure or apologize for his gravity. That man haunts her whether you like it or not. Not because he is better, but because he is not accessible. And in your effort to be present, to prove that you're not like the others, to be the antidote to her past pain, you became the man she doesn't fear losing. Not because you weren't loyal, but because you were always available. And availability, unchecked, breeds contempt. You see, a woman doesn't always choose who treats her best. She aligns with the man who sharpens her, who challenges her posture, who holds his frame so firmly that she either rises to meet it or disappears in the face of it. That kind of man doesn't explain himself. He doesn't ask her what she needs. He sets the terms. He lives by them, and in doing so, he activates something ancient inside her. Not dependence, reverence, and that reverence becomes her decision. She follows, not because he demands it, but because his life moves with such self-contained force that she wants to be inside its orbit. But you gave everything. You gave softness, presence, loyalty, time. You gave your pain. You gave your plans. You gave your history. You told her what the others had done to you, and you asked her not to be like them. But in doing so, you made her the judge. You gave her the gavel. And no woman desires a man she has to swear an oath to. She wants to feel his law, not be asked to uphold it. When she saw how open you were, how willing you were to shift, to forgive, to tolerate, she made her decision. Quietly. She didn't leave. She just recalibrated, emotionally, spiritually, sexually, and you became the fallback, the emotional safety net, the stability she could access but never truly submit to. And that's when her eyes changed. That's when she stopped being warm without asking. That's when your presence became something she could schedule around. You were her option because you made yourself accessible before she earned your edge. You gave her the throne without asking if she could carry it. And when she failed to respect it, you asked what you did wrong, without ever seeing that your failure was simple. You tried to be loved instead of chosen. You thought your goodness was enough. But goodness without dominance becomes a burden. You became the man who cared too much. And she, forced into a position of control, began to withhold. Not to manipulate, but to escape the weight you gave her when you placed her at the center of your world. You were her option because she never felt what it would cost to lose you. Because your presence didn't reshape her world. Because your standards bent when her emotions flared. Because your time was always available. And because you mistook her comfort with you as commitment to you. But comfort does not bind the feminine. Challenge does. Power does. Absence does. A man who has structure, consequence, enforcement, that is a man who gets chosen, not just visited. Masculine power does not scream. It does not argue. It does not flood her with explanations or bury her in reasons why you deserve respect. It sits. It observes. It draws lines. And when those lines are crossed, it removes access. Not with rage, not with emotional fireworks, but with disappearance. Because true masculine authority does not enforce itself through noise, it enforces itself through boundary, distance, and silence. You were told that strength meant showing up no matter what, staying through the storms, proving you care by always being emotionally accessible. But that is not strength. That is servitude. That is availability disguised as virtue. And no woman, no matter how much she says she wants a man who opens up, ever truly respects a man who cannot walk away in silence when his standard is violated. You kept giving her more time, more forgiveness, more emotional language. You made your feelings so clear, so loud, so ever-present that they became a fog, warm, soft, predictable. And she thanked you. But she stopped watching you. She stopped studying you. She stopped checking your temperature because you were always warm, always present, always turned toward her. And in that space where she used to feel curiosity, tension, mystery, she now felt certainty. And that certainty killed attraction. Because what she wants is not volume. What she wants is gravity. Something that pulls her closer without reaching. Something she has to earn. Something she knows can vanish without warning, not because you're cruel, but because your law comes before her comfort. Machiavelli understood this principle. Rulers must not only command, they must withhold. When a prince makes himself too available to his subjects, when he listens to every complaint, explains every policy, pleads for approval, he stops being feared. And when he stops being feared, he starts being replaced. You think love is built by presence. But love, when given freely and without pressure, becomes weightless. And weightless men do not hold kingdoms. They get invited into emotional chaos and asked to mop up the damage they did not cause. So here is your correction. Stop explaining. Stop texting through disrespect. Stop proving your intentions. Let your silence become consequence. Let your absence become structure. When she pulls away, don't pull closer. When she disrespects, don't argue. Disappear. Let her feel what distance means. Let her sit with your silence until it carves a new boundary into her nervous system. Because the man who removes himself without warning is the man who makes her recalibrate. Not because she is afraid of losing attention, but because she feels the loss of architecture. And the feminine cannot thrive in a world without structure. Your power is not in your ability to stay when she's difficult. Your power is in your ability to vanish when she becomes disrespectful. Your power is not in the volume of your emotions. It's in the calm you maintain when hers explode. Your power is in rhythm, in scarcity, in knowing that your presence is not a gift, it is a law. And when that law is violated, you don't raise your voice. You simply leave. You close the gate. You return to your throne and let her feel the absence not of affection but of access. That is what she will remember. That is what she will chase. Not because she wants punishment, but because she wants to feel your frame again. And you do not restore that frame with words. You restore it with silence that enforces. You gave her emotion. She needed gravity. You gave her tenderness, openness, transparency. But she was scanning for something heavier, something immovable, something that doesn't change its temperature every time hers shifts. And the longer you misunderstood this, the more she began to decay inside your affection. You thought your emotions would move her, that your vulnerability would bring you closer, that if you were honest, soft, emotionally fluent, she would finally feel safe. But safety to her is not built on how you feel. It is built on how you hold. And if your emotions pull you away from your posture, if your love bends your law, if your devotion requires you to surrender your direction, then your affection becomes weightless. And the feminine cannot submit to what floats. She needs your center, not your stories. She needs your ability to stay still when her chaos erupts. She needs to see that her emotion does not shift your direction, that your tone remains cold when hers becomes volcanic, not because you are numb, but because you are the structure. And the structure does not move for the storm, it waits. It lets the thunder pass, and then it restores silence. You think your heart is your greatest gift. But what she respects is not the depth of your feelings. What she respects is how you hold them. Your emotional depth is only attractive if it is housed inside a frame she cannot shake. If your love turns to pleading, if your care turns to collapse, if your openness becomes overexposure, she will not thank you. She will feel the weight fall on her. And a woman forced to carry your gravity will drop her femininity in the process. Machiavelli said rulers must cultivate the appearance of compassion, but never allow it to override the demands of statecraft. And your heart, if not disciplined, will become your ruin. You were not meant to be the source of her feelings. You were meant to contain them, to be the container she can collapse inside without fearing your collapse in response. But you made yourself porous. You let every emotion become a negotiation. You turned your soul inside out and expected her to cherish it. But she didn't. She began to withdraw. Not because you weren't expressive enough, but because your expressions had no border. Understand this, she may cry in your arms, but she cannot admire a man who cries to gain leverage. She may say she wants more connection, but she respects the man who withholds just enough to make his presence rare. She may ask for more access, but she craves a man who denies her when her behavior does not match her words. This is not manipulation, this is masculinity. And your failure to see this is what turned your passion into pressure, your sensitivity into servitude. What she craves is not your feelings, it is your spine. What makes her melt is not your openness, it's your discipline. She doesn't want to be overwhelmed by your love. She wants to be held inside your law. And when that law is unshakable, your silence becomes sacred, your presence becomes rare, and your emotional depth becomes something she worships. Not because it flows freely, but because it is governed by a king who knows that gravity is not something you give, it's something you become. You were told she would follow love, that if you were kind, loyal, expressive, and sincere, she would stand by you, that your devotion would anchor her, your sensitivity would attract her, your emotional intelligence would keep her interest alive. But you were lied to, because she doesn't obey love. She obeys strength. And when I say strength, I do not mean shouting or control. I mean the kind of strength that moves without apology, that leaves when lines are crossed, that stays silent when provoked, that lives by a law so clear it doesn't require explanation. She obeys a man not because he feels deeply, but because his feelings never override his standard. You thought she wanted your soul bared, but the moment you made your affection louder than your enforcement, she stopped seeing you as a ruler and began managing you like a risk. Understand this now and never forget it. Love is not what keeps her loyal. Power is. And power to the feminine is not about domination, it is about consequence. A man who cannot enforce consequence is not safe. He is soft. And a soft man may feel good in moments of emotional peace, but he collapses in seasons of storm. She needs to know you can survive her worst days without losing yourself, that you can hear her threats and remain unmoved, that your leadership does not tremble when she tests your edge, and if you cannot give her that edge, she will search for it elsewhere. Not because she wants to leave, but because biology pulls her toward what she fears, what she respects, what she cannot control. She obeys strength because strength gives her safety without asking for permission. It moves through her world without needing her validation. It draws her in, not with flattery, but with posture. You begged for her to stay, but the man she stays for is not the man who asks. It is the man who walks, who enforces, who disappears with dignity when the line is crossed, who doesn't try to resolve the conflict but makes the price of conflict too high to begin with. That is who she obeys, not because she is weak, but because she wants to be led. And leadership does not live in explanation. It lives in execution. You gave her poems, but she wanted architecture. You gave her attention, but she wanted order. You gave her presence, but she wanted protection. Not emotional coddling, but consequence. Because the woman who fears losing you is the woman who studies how to keep you. And she does not learn that through long talks. She learns it through silence, through space, through the knowledge that you are not like other men. Not because you're nicer, but because your time, your body, your attention are governed by an inner court no one else can sit in without invitation. So remember this. She may say she wants you to open up, and sometimes she does. But what she wants more is to feel the door can close, that your generosity is not a default setting, that it can be revoked, that the kindness you show is not infinite but conditional. Conditional on respect, conditional on honor, conditional on her understanding that love is not what makes you stay. Law is. And if she violates that law, she loses her place beside it, not because you're punishing her, but because you're sovereign. You've been moving emotionally. You need to start moving politically, because that is what masculinity is when stripped of illusion. Not kindness, not charisma, not effort, but strategy. Cold, quiet, controlled strategy. You've been taught to think that being a good man means sacrificing your edge to be agreeable, transparent, endlessly receptive to her feelings. But the man who does this is not seen as noble. He is seen as disposable. She won't say it, but she feels it. The man who explains himself constantly, who adjusts his identity to fit her emotional needs, who forgives betrayal without consequence, who gives more after being disrespected, he becomes predictable. And what is predictable cannot lead. The Machiavellian man understands this. He understands that power must be guarded, not gifted. That kindness must be conditional. That access must be earned. You must now reframe your entire architecture. You are not her equal in sentiment. You are not her mirror. You are not there to make her feel better about who she is. You are there to enforce your standard, define your world, and allow her in if, and only if, she aligns with it. That is the beginning of strategic masculinity. You do not pursue, you establish. You do not explain your values, you live by them. You do not ask for respect. You remove access from those who withhold it. And in doing so, you teach through absence what cannot be taught through language. Start here. Never reward disloyalty. Not with your time, your conversation, your body, or your silence. If she tests your boundary and you respond with generosity, you've taught her that your structure can be bought with discomfort. And she will use that currency again. Second, never re-explain your boundary. One statement is law. Anything after is negotiation. And kings do not negotiate the terms of their throne. Third, if respect is lost, you do not stay to repair it. You disappear, and let your absence haunt the space your clarity once occupied. Fourth, reward behavior, not emotion. She cries. Observe. She apologizes. Wait. She acts differently, consistently without prompting. Then and only then do you return access. Not because she's forgiven, but because her actions prove she now understands the cost of your presence. Fifth, validate through structure, not softness. Your validation is not in compliments or gestures. It's in the way your life runs. It's in your rhythm, your control, your absence of apology. When she enters your world, she feels your frame, or she leaves. And that is not cruelty, that is law. This is the Machiavellian masculine code. No revenge, no overcorrection, just structure. Silent, strategic, and final. Because the woman who cannot feel your edge will try to become it. And once she becomes it, she loses the part of herself that ever admired you. But when she feels your discipline, not your dominance, not your volume, but your inner sovereignty, she recalibrates. Because even if she doesn't say it, Even if she protests it, she wants to follow a man who cannot be moved. You have spent your life trying to be chosen. That ends now. From this moment forward, you are not here to be picked. You are here to be impossible to replace. The new male standard is not built on likability, compatibility, or emotional availability. It is built on positioning, control, scarcity, structure. The man who is untouchable does not orbit women. He orbits purpose. His time is locked. His attention is earned. His presence is conditioned. He is not cruel. He is calibrated. He speaks with rhythm, not urgency. He disappears without explanation. He disciplines access, not because he is insecure, but because he understands that power not protected becomes property. And the man who becomes property loses reverence first, then respect, then everything. If you want to be untouchable, you must become self-contained. The man who is needed does not need. He does not fill his days with validation. He does not leak his standards through sentiment. He knows that presence without edge is charity. And no woman trusts a man she pities. She may like you. She may even feel safe with you. But if she senses that her mood shapes your behavior, your entire frame collapses. Women do not want to control you. They want to see that you cannot be controlled, not through dominance, through indifference, through enforcement, through unwavering internal order that punishes inconsistency with silence, not speeches. Untouchable men move on schedule. They exit at the first sign of casual disrespect. They never fight for clarity. They let confusion remove the unworthy. They do not chase closure. They give consequence. They don't brag. They don't correct women through argument. They correct through absence. They are so tied to mission that even when in love, they are willing to walk, not for ego, for law. And because of this, they don't just earn attraction. They hold it. Over time. Over tension. Over silence. Because the woman knows he's still there. But he is not mine unless I remain aligned. And that unspoken tension is what makes her discipline herself to stay worthy of his presence. The untouchable man is never emotional in enforcement. He is calm, precise. He does not argue when standards are broken. He doesn't need to. His pattern changes. His availability disappears. His rhythm becomes colder. And because he says nothing, because he just moves, she learns. She recalibrates, not out of fear, but out of awe. And that awe is what sustains loyalty, not comfort, not connection, but consequence. You must now become that man, the one who listens but doesn't explain, the one who gives but only after behavior earns it, the one whose silence builds more pressure than another man's apology. You do not become feared. You become measured. And that measurement makes her choose differently, speak differently, move differently. Because now she is not trying to keep your affection. She is trying not to lose her place inside your world. You've been kind. That was your weakness. Now be disciplined. That will be your sovereignty. Now you know. She didn't change. You trained her to. With every silent tolerance of disrespect, you taught her that your edge could be rounded. With every over-explanation, you taught her that your law could be negotiated. With every soft return after betrayal, you taught her that access to you required no cost. And the more you gave without demand, the more she pulled away. Not because she hated you, but because she stopped believing in your gravity. You made her your purpose. And she made you her option. Not because she's heartless, but because you stopped being a ruler and started performing for affection. And affection, when earned through submission, becomes emotional poverty. What you called loyalty was learned helplessness. What you called forgiveness was structural surrender. And what you now call heartbreak was the final price for building a kingdom without walls. You gave her everything, and she left, not out of confusion, but out of clarity. She saw that she could move you, that she could set the rhythm, that she could test the laws of your world and find no punishment. And what is a world without law? It is chaos, and no woman, no matter how beautiful, wants to live in the chaos she created. She wants a man who holds the line, who doesn't need her to validate his standard, who says less but means more, who can walk at any time and never announce it. You thought you were being noble. You thought mercy would breed intimacy. You thought vulnerability would keep her heart. But Machiavelli warned you centuries ago. Mercy without strength creates contempt. Familiarity without boundaries breeds betrayal. And a prince who is always present is never feared. This is not theory. This is not bitterness. This is historical law. And now you carry it. You are no longer the man who needs her to see your worth. You are the man who makes her earn access to your presence. And in doing so, you become untouchable, not because you withdraw affection, but because your affection is governed by architecture. So do not apologize. Do not spiral. Do not ask why she didn't stay. She stayed as long as she could believe in your frame. When the frame cracked, so did her desire. Your softness didn't save the relationship, it sabotaged it. And now you rise, not by becoming cruel, but by becoming clear. You don't enforce standards to control her. You enforce them to resurrect yourself. If this has revealed your pattern, if you finally see what your mercy cost you, then comment, "No more softness without structure." And subscribe, not for dating advice, but for war strategy. You are not here to be forgiven. You are here to be remembered. And that will not come through love. It will come through law. Build it, rule it, or be ruled by those who never respected it.